Everybody wants to be a part of the culture.
Until it's time to be diverse, equitable, and inclusive.
So we're having the uncomfortable conversations needed to spark the change.
Right here, right now.
We're your hosts, Kai Devereaux Lawson.
And I'm Simeon Coker.
And we say all the things you wouldn't.
Welcome back to the Mixed Company Podcast.
Okay, is this thing on? It has been quite a while.
It's on.
I guess it's on. Or as the millennials used to say back in the day, on and poppin'. I'm sure the kids don't say that no more. We've grown as hell. We're so grown. I have to check my
that felt wrong.
I'm sure it felt wrong. I'm sure I'm officially not a cool kid anymore. But what will always be cool is that we are back with another season of Mixed Company Podcast after going on a year-long hiatus.
Mm-hmm.
Simeon, how have you been?
I have been through all the things. And I think you called it a Serena gap year, so I'm rocking with that.
I didn't, but it is a Serena gap year.
Yeah. So we've been gone for a minute, back with the jump off. I'm good. Today's been a busy day. Last year was busy. For a lot of reasons. A lot of things happened. It's the first time my job was in the news every day.
Oh my gosh. You were basically an influencer.
I was living a real-time nightmare. And we don't need to say no names, but
we don't? We can't? Why can't we? What's gonna happen?
I mean, shout out to everybody who's on the Elon sabbatical. That's all.
Okay, Elon sabbatical. That's what we'll call it.
Shout out to everybody who's on the Elon sabbatical who got an email randomly one night that says if you're logged out of your email tomorrow morning, you no longer have a job.
Shout out. What a life we live. But I guess we'll get into that. So welcome everybody to Mixed Company Podcast. If you had been rocking with us between the years, which seems so ancient now, 2016 and 2021, you already know what it is. If you've never heard us before and you're here by accident, welcome. Take off your coat, stay a while. I am one of your co-hosts. I am Kai Devereaux motherfucking Lawson. But if I'm at work, it's usually just Kai Devereaux Lawson. And I'm here with my co-host,
Simeon Coker.
And I'm about to say that's it. That's it. And we lead this podcast, Mixed Company Podcast. Just a quick refresher. When we started this podcast back in 2016, it was really to take a moment for ourselves, really just therapy. This is before I think we could afford therapy, and really just kind of I was gonna say bitch about our jobs, but it wasn't even like that. It was like our opportunity to say all the things out loud that nobody else would want to say in Mixed Company. And so we created this platform, we created this space to have honest conversations about what it was like being a person of color, but really and truly Black in advertising and creative spaces, and how we experienced the conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion without actually being in charge. And so we did that for what, 5 years? I can't count. 2016.
Yeah, that's about 5-6 years.
Yeah, we did that for a while. And then guess what happened, y'all? We got better jobs.
And a whole pandemic happened.
A pandemic happened.
You know, one thing I was thinking about today, because I'm writing something to present, is like, I think that our passion for like culture outside of like diversity, equity, and inclusion was like a driving force for like what we were doing.
100%.
And as I was writing stuff, I was like, the whole tone of this podcast has been like influenced by hip hop and the values and the behaviors of that. And so that's why we're still here. That's why we're still back. I think there are things that need to be said. We had a decentish pandemic moment of DEI where everybody was getting jobs and it was fun. And now we're back to
we're on the other side of it. I mean, we recorded through those first 2 years of the pandemic, and really talking about those changes in 2020 and 2021, and going back and listening to some episodes. Like, just so much has changed over the last 6 years. But I think what we realized was two things, and this is why you either haven't heard from us in a while, or this is the first time you're hearing from us. First of all, people were burnt the fuck out, like, just point blank, period. There was just too much going on, even for ourselves. It became very hard. I'll speak for myself and Simeon, like, if you think differently, but it became very difficult for me to survive a pandemic, keep a job, have a relationship, keep my friends around, and still, like, drink water, sometimes exercise, and whatever the hell else we're supposed to do. Like, something had to go. And for me, the podcast was the thing that could get put on the back burner. And especially, I think, at the time that I think we named the last episode like Final-ish, because we didn't know. So millennial.
We know what's gonna happen.
Right. Like, the commitment, like, I am scared of commitment to quit. Like, I don't know. I might come back.
Because here we are.
Because here we are. But, like, even at that time, it was like, man, I don't know what the hell else we could talk about, because we done said everything that there is to say, or that I at the time had to say, about racism, sexism, bias, microaggressions, representation, and and it's like, but you don't hear me though. So I needed a goddamn break. Where were you at with it, December 2021, Simeon?
I needed a break. I'm glad that you articulated that we needed a break, because 2022 was insanity. Started a new job, got laid off from a job. Personal life was just like wild crazy. So yeah, it was needed. I think, one of the things I've been telling people lately, because I guess I'm like a spiritual guru, is that
Okay.
the crazy things that were happening, I think, were like signs to like really slow down, because we were going top speed and it felt comfortable because we were accomplishing things that we wanted to accomplish.
Agreed.
And the pandemic and being burnt out was like a really good time to like stop and reflect and figure out what's next. And as we were doing that, like, our careers were like accelerating, or
Literally.
yeah, they were accelerating and elevating. And so yeah, we had to approach it from a different perspective, because it's no longer what we said at the beginning. It's like, we're not mid-level anymore. We're actually the people that we were talking shit about.
We are literally the people we were talking shit about. Like, and I always look at the irony of my life through that lens, because listen, manifestation is real. And I don't know if anybody else is into that. What is it? Metaphysics, The Secret, God, whatever you do, universe, whatever you do, y'all. For me and my house, it is very real. And it's real in the context of, when I was in college, I said I would never work in advertising, because it was for people who were lame and couldn't get into entertainment. And then I couldn't get in entertainment, so I ended up in advertising. And then here we were talking, really, and it was talking shit, I think, is the familiar way to express it. But I think the proper way, because we are adults now, so we know how to speak two languages, grown up and ratchet. I think the grown up way to say it is that, we were heavily critiquing an industry and a culture that we loved, right? Like, shout out to James Baldwin for making that real for a lot of people. But like, if we didn't care, we wouldn't talk about it. If it didn't bother us, if it didn't hurt us, if we didn't want it to actually be better, and to want something to be better requires a lot of love, we wouldn't have talked as much shit as we did. We wouldn't have had the episodes about sexism, about racism, about accessibility, about the LGBTQ plus community and how to engage them and how to be better leaders, if we actually didn't A, believe it could happen, and B, want to see it happen. And so the way the universe, and I identify as Christian, me and my God work you know, he was like, haha, shout out to Usher, watch this. Since you talk so much mess, we're gonna put you in charge. And that's kind of what the last couple years have been, but particularly since we last recorded, you know, for me, it's just been my experience actually being a direct leader, a highly visible leader in this space. And it's been wild and crazy kids. Shout out to Omar Gooding. Nobody remembers him. I keep making 90s references, and these
I know who you're
kids
talking
I
about.
talk to, like, they be like, huh? What?
Yeah,
What is
you
that?
keep making references from the 1900s is
From
what
the
you're doing.
1900s. I keep referencing the 1900s and they don't understand.
Yeah, but you know the thing that was like giving us peace when we were doing was that we were calling it solution venting, right? So we would say whatever it is that we needed to say, but always end the episode with a takeaway, what should be happening. And what I really think we were doing, because we weren't in the positions to actually change the colors, change the cultures, is we were kind of creating our thesis, right? We had all of these ideas and theories about what should be happening and how people should be managed and the systems that should be in place at work to ensure that they're diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And I think we manifested our roles because we've been able to not just like talk about it, but actually do the things. And I don't know about you, but like my biggest thing was, you know, and Tracy May from Chicago said this in 3%, is like bad creative director begets bad creative director begets bad creative director, right? And so like a lot of my gripes are around creative directors. So to now be in a situation where I am a creative director and I'm going to toot my own horn and say people like to work for me. They like to work with me, and they appreciate my style of managing. I feel good. I feel like we had a few years of really talking about something that we wanted to see happen, and now we're able to make it happen.
I agree. I also have heard people like to work with you. I've never worked for you, so I don't know. But you know, the streets talk or whatever, and that's what I've heard. I think it's really special for us to be able to come back to this conversation about creativity, particularly because, you know, a lot of what we focused on, or what I was very particular about focusing on, in I don't know, what do we call it? Is this BC? Yeah, before COVID and after
Mm,
COVID,
yep.
BC. A lot of what we focused, I guess it's not after, it's during COVID. Anyway,
Hmm.
a lot of what we focused on was the ad industry. And you know, Simeon, I give you credit where it's due. You're always very keen on having a broader conversation about culture, entertainment, creativity, and the different areas that manifests. Because you are right, and you continue to be right, especially as all of these worlds continue to converge in ways that, you know, people really tried to keep barriers and boxes before,
Yeah.
but now it's like your advertising agency is working, social influencership is working with record
Mm,
labels, is using musicians as influencers, is making movies and doing stuff with sporting events. And it's
yeah.
like it's the same world. We look at it through different lenses, we
Mm,
enter it through different doors, but we play in the same sandbox. And so, you know, this time around, my expectation, and maybe not my expectation, but more so my I'm more open to having that
mm,
broader conversation. And I'll even be a little bit vulnerable and share that, you know, a lot of why I wanted us to focus on solely advertising in the ad space before was really to validate our influence and understanding of this business. And
mhm.
you know, a big learning from working with this podcast and producing this podcast has been that, like, our value isn't really attached to the podcast, but more so to what we know about the world around us. And so I'm excited for us to have more conversations like you've been wanting to have, friend.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're referring to is like the thought leadership. I think the thought leadership is the thing that's actually been putting a dent in culture, because when we look at when we started, the thing that sticks out to me was the amount of people who looked at us like we were crazy, like we couldn't say the things that we were saying because no one else was saying them. And now you fast forward to this point, and
It's a whole generation of people that say all of the things
all
everywhere
the
to
things,
everybody.
loud and wrong sometimes too, right? So
Loud,
it's
clear, and wrong. And even when there is wrong, there is like no, even when I'm like no, I also understand like you got to go through a process.
yeah, yeah. So I think my North Star this time around is definitely about creativity, but looking at it through the lens of internal cultures and then American culture as a whole. Because one of my theories now is like, I don't care how many strategists you have. If your team is not diverse, you're going to miss something. You're going to miss a nuance. If you're not being intentional about creating inclusive work, you're going to miss something somewhere. And so, really leaning into the fact that how these teams are created and how they are managed is directly in line with the work that we're seeing out in the world. And that's my goal.
I think my goal, as we move forward, is to really bring more visibility to what happens on the inside. And like,
Mm.
I share with people constantly. I must have said this. I'm trying to think how many meetings I had yesterday, maybe like 4 or 5 times, with several folks. I had some conversation with some folks from the trades, and really sharing with them, like, when we started this podcast, a lot of our POV on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, really focused on what they were telling us and what they weren't telling us, right? So that was the only visibility that we had. And so that also begets a lot of critique,
Mm.
because what's reported is actually what's also always been reported. And it's not actually wrong. And that's the thing, like, you're not saying anything wrong, you're just not saying anything else,
Right.
right? And so, with how my life career experience kind of shifted over the last year or so, has been really seeing like the intricacies and those nuances that like nobody knows, but also nobody talks about. And also recognizing that like there's a reason why people didn't talk about it, because who you want to talk about it to? For so many years, nobody gave a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fuck about DEI. DEI was go make your little BRGs and stay out of our way. Okay. You
Yep.
want happy hour, we give you a happy hour. You want a reward, we got you with some pizza. Shout out to Severance on Apple TV Plus for bringing, like, I felt so seen in Severance. Like, I just need people to know I felt so seen in Severance, especially during the pizza party reward, like, or the waffle party reward. Because I was like, yo, people really be trying to play you. Like, you just, thank you so much for helping us generate these millions of dollars. Here's your pizza. Here's your pizza. And you can only have one.
And enjoy.
Enjoy. And make sure you show me that you're happy, or else you'll never get one of these again, So like that existed for so long. So like I get why a lot of folks, the folks that have come before me in this space, may not have necessarily spoken about it. I also understand like the ramifications of sharing certain things. So like you want to be transparent, but you know how y'all get. You know how we get. You know how everybody gets. Everything gets judged. And being in a business where like being judged in a particular way can be the difference between you making and breaking your business, there's a lot of fear around it. So I mean, I say all that to say, like, I have new perspective. Am I humbled? Yes. Does that matter? No. I'm still gonna say what I want to say. But I have a greater empathy, but also a bigger understanding about the work and about how things happen. I think a lot of times, the last time or the last go around with this podcast, we would often ask, yo, who the hell was at the table? Well, who said that? Who did that? Why they said that? And like, there's a lot that goes into it. Now, let me not make anybody think that I am an apologist. No. Oh, no. Some of the shit still be on some bullshit. And we will talk about the dope shit and the ain't shit.
Yeah.
But there's
right.
deeper complexity. We were right. And I think that's kind of what I've seen as we've evolved, is like, we were right, but we also didn't have the right context.
Right.
And as we continue to have these conversations about representation, culture, authenticity, and how that relates to the greater world, that context is actually the thing that needs to be addressed, not just whether it's right or wrong, good or bad. The polarity of righteousness is not what we should be arguing. At least that's what I believe now. But it's more so the understanding the context of why people behave the way they do, why they make decisions they make, and then addressing that so that we can make more aggressive change. And that means that it's now a science, right? Like, this is very technical, this is very operational. It's not good enough to just, at least the way I see it now, it's not good enough to just be a good or bad person. Good people make really shitty decisions all the fucking time.
All the time.
Okay. That's why there are several degrees to, I was going to say murder, but just several degrees to any crime. Like, just because you weren't the one to do the crime, you could be a part of a conspiracy. And I think like that is how we have to look at that's better than what I was really gonna say. But like, you can actually aid in the crime of lack of inclusion by association. And also there are some people that, you know, I think that we may have identified as villains in the past that actually aren't really the villains and may just have been misunderstood, miscommunicated to, or wrong place, wrong time. And so there's just so much. It also makes me feel old. And I know people are more mature than we are gonna say shut up. But like, coming into this space and no longer being the kid. I think when we started this, we were kind of perceived as like the young voices. We're not the young voices anymore. And so that in itself will play a role in how we have our conversations on this platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Being in a leadership position, I think some of the moments that you're talking about is where it's just sticky as fuck. Like, it's just sticky, right? And it's messy, and because these systems have been in place for X amount of time, like, people feel very comfortable doing business a certain way. And so I think a lot of what we were talking about was like how to do business differently, specifically within agencies, because it's so subjective, because it has been so cutthroat. And so I think now we're in a position where we can not only like discuss it, but we can go into wherever we're working and test those theories out, and be humble enough to go, all right, that was wrong. How do we pivot? Or what was a learning from this one that we could take to the next one? And I think that would be the thing that we're sharing, because, you know, advertising is one of those places. And I think a lot of creative industries where you don't get managerial training. You are given leadership positions. And we've talked about this before, because you do great work, and that hasn't worked before. I think a lot of the horror stories that we talked about in those first couple of seasons were just due to people who were shitty managers and weren't looking at business or looking at how to manage through a lens of humanity. And now we can bring that. We can actually say, y'all are shitty. This is what we did to make our situations better when we're dealing with whoever on our teams.
And I think that's what's going to make, and I'm saying going to, that's really for y'all, but I think for us as friends, as industry colleagues, etc., I think that's what's made us better leaders. So like before, when we started this podcast, we were speaking truth to power from spaces of power, speaking and bringing more clarity to where we identified, which was that messy middle. I think is going to be helpful, because for me, that's where I think that's where a lot more change needs to happen. I'm not saying that C-suite executives are off the hook in any way, shape, or form, keep the same energy. And, before we were only talking to them.
Yeah.
And what happens and I'll use 2020 as an example. What happens when you focus your attention on one layer of people to make a change? Everybody else be like, yup, that's right. Tell them, make them, they need to. And then when you say, well, what are you going to do? They're like, they're not talking to me. I don't need to do nothing. I'm an ally. I'm a good person. I understand. I believe Black Lives Matter. And so I do not need to, and that's not the case. It literally in a system. I actually had someone tell me at some point last year, and it boiled my blood to no end. They were like, I don't think that there's a process problem. I think there's a people problem. And I had to push back and challenge, like, well, what is the difference between a people problem and a process problem if the people are the ones carrying out the process?
And they
Because
created the process.
if you're changing the rules and they still want to do the process the way they want to do the process, then it is the same challenge. It is the same challenge, right? And so we can't, I don't believe that we can pull people away from that. And I also believe that accountability is just as hierarchical. I don't know.
Let's go with that.
Accountability is a vertical and a horizontal experience. It
Absolutely.
is not just talking up and speaking truth to power above you, but it's speaking truth to power within your teams and within yourselves. And I'm looking forward to offering perspective on how people can be accountable for their own, for the smaller communities that they engage in, not just us making the change for us, because that didn't work, but for everybody that loves to say they love DEI and I believe in DEI and I'm here for representation. Well, baby, we need you to do something too. And so that's what I'm looking forward to having conversations about.
I love it.
So let's talk about real quick, what are some of the things, Sim, that have changed for you, or that have changed in industry and culture since December 20, or let's say January 2022, last January? What's something that you were like, hold the front door? What is up?
What happened last January?
I mean, it could also be in June. It could be in November. It could be in January.
Yeah, I think one of the big things, and I guess this is something that I observed and also falls under the ain't shit category, is that a lot of the progress that was made as a knee-jerk reaction to the racial uprisings of 2020, a lot of that is fading away, being reversed, just being undone. And there was an article that I was reading in Forbes about the 12 ways that CEOs and companies failed chief diversity officers, because a lot of them were hired as a knee-jerk reaction. And I think they made some really good points that even speak to what we were just talking about earlier, of just, speaking up to them and not having a peek behind the curtain didn't allow us to advocate for them in ways that, as the people they were looking to serve, we could have, because, what I'm saying, if you need more people, like, you got to go gang, gang, right? You have to say that. And so I'll just run through the points really quick. So like the CDOs are chiefs and vice president in names only. So basically they don't have a P&L. They aren't giving any real decision-making power. They have a title. And I would say the easiest way to say it is like they're like professional babysitters for these companies. The second point that they made was CEOs rarely talk to the CDOs. And I think this is something that we talked about on this podcast, is that, diversity or diversity, equity, and inclusion there's a business case for it. And so having those people just report to HR is a missed opportunity, because they can directly affect your bottom line. Again, number 3, CDOs don't report to the CEO. Again, the same thing. And they're hired into haphazardly conceived jobs. And like, what does that mean? Basically, this job was created without any real thought or vision into how it fits into the structure of this company. And I think some of us have been hired in ways like that, where we get hired and there's no 30, 60 day, 90-day plan. There's no real onboarding. You're not set up for success. Number 5, CDO roles are lopsidedly HR focused, which you just hit on. But there's definitely a business case for it. Execs attempt to solve DEI problems without CDOs. And I think we saw a lot of those missteps in 2020, aka the Black Squares. Like, we'll never forget.
We will never forget. Pepsi could not have been happier for the Black Squares to happen. So people had a different case study to use about how not to do activism in your marketing. Like, baby, thank you. Whoever came up with, you know what I'm going to do? I am going to post a Black Square, which in the retrospect, don't ever associate me and my Blackness with squareness. Like, I just think culture, being square is not cool. But also, like, and people are still living lives that are not equitable to higher standards in society. So
agreed. Number 7 was CDOs. What CDOs say about racial problems gets discredited. And I think, that's what was happening for some of the things that we were saying earlier on in this podcast, where they were just saying it's not true. And I think one of the great things about this podcast is that we were able to hold some people accountable on the podcast and really talk about the insights from our perspective as people that were reporting into the C-suite. Number 8, DI work isn't connected deeply to the business strategy, which just talked about. What CDOs do isn't viewed as high stakes. And I think it is one of the things that I've been talking about with people who I'm interviewing with, is like, if you don't have good retention, you didn't get a return on your investment, right? Like, hiring people is a investment. There's money spent on the hiring, there's money spent on the onboarding, there's money spent when these people start working. And so if you're not getting a return on your investment, and I hate to look at it through like a capitalistic lens, but ultimately, like, did you get a return, right? And so CDOs' professional reputations are put at risk. And I would say, like, this is basically saying, like, the CDOs are on the front line of decisions that they may not be in charge of, which speaks to a lot of the things that we were critiquing at the beginning of this podcast, where, these CDOs, they were just there in name only. And the only thing that they could do was create a panel discussion during Black History Month or Latin Heritage Month. And that was it. And then, Number 11, nothing or very little is done to retain CDOs. So one of the things that they mentioned is that the CDOs, a percentage of the CDOs that were hired during 2020, 2021 are gone, or they left, they got fired, whatever the case may be. So they're out. So their diversity strategy is like down the toilet. And then the last one is nothing changes from one CDO to the next. Because there really isn't a North Star. And we've talked about this on the podcast. It's like, what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you? How do you define those values for your agency, for your company? If those aren't clearly articulated, nothing's going to change, because you can't onboard the new CDO with what the old CDO was doing if what that old CDO was doing was fugazi. And so I really like this article because I think it summed up what a lot of us have been feeling or seeing within the industry in the last couple of months, especially with the layoffs and the inhumane way that they've gone down in some places. I felt like this article really hit at some of the core challenges that CDOs have, which is why we're not seeing change at scale across the industry.
And I just want to go on the record and say, because I know some people that I work with listen to this, I do not feel that is impacting my role. Okay, I just, it's review season. Okay, it's bonus season, and I just want to go on the record and say, I have had a very different experience in my space, and honestly, like that played heavily into me choosing to take on the role of a true head of inclusion for a set of agencies. And because y'all know, like we talked about it. I keep manifesting
I
the
want you
wrong
to say
thing.
it. I want you to say
I said
it.
I would never,
Never be
ever.
ever work in
That's what I
diversity.
said. That's what I said, y'all. I said I would never do this job. I would never,
Never.
and I would never, I would never. And that's why you don't say things like that. And you definitely don't
Yeah.
say it on a podcast.
But you know what? And one of the running jokes right now on the internet is like when Whitney said that we were the future, she set us up for failure. I think that, like, from my point of perspective, I'll give you your flowers. I think that the way that you're approaching diversity, equity, and inclusion is the future, right? Because you are
I agree.
very business focused. You don't come from a traditional HR background. You come from a process background, and you come from a getting things done background. So a lot of those challenges that I think are here, I think you set yourself up for success in the beginning because you went in talking about these things and making sure that you had the autonomy to create what you wanted to create.
100%. And so, like, I say all that to say, not just to, not just to brag on myself or to kiss butt, but
What are
really
your
it's more
flowers?
so, it's really more so to acknowledge that I do have colleagues who are experiencing that. Like, I'm not gonna lie, if your company is coming to my LinkedIn box and asking me if I know people that want to be DEI, and you're telling me you don't have an actual budget in place, or that you won't have a budget in place and you don't have no money, then what are
No
they
money.
supposed to do? Like, I said it earlier today. It's akin to being like a chief financial officer of an organization.
Mm.
What am I supposed to do just by telling people, no, don't spend money like that?
Yeah.
That does nothing, no influence.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in my circumstance, in my case, and I won't say my agency, even though I know folks can find stuff out, but like, these are the rules of speaking on mixed company. We don't talk about where we work directly because you never know, right?
We
But
don't say
where,
names.
in my experience, it's really been like the direct access and working and reporting into my CEO was imperative. I would never do it if I didn't have access to a head in my organization that oversaw the business. I would never do the job if it didn't impact the greater business. I think I've also had the support and have built the trust and rapport across several leaders within the organization to be able to have conversations, because it's not good enough to want to be a good person. And like, I really want people to divorce themselves from that mindset that somehow inclusion and DE&I is about treating everybody like equal and making everybody happy and we all love each other. It is not. It is ugly, and we cuss and we fight. Okay?
It's messy.
We fight. Like, it's messy, it's ugly, it hurts, it's emotionally draining. This job is emotionally draining because there's nothing like seeing people in need and knowing how to get them what they need, but you can't get them what they need because of the complexities. And now I got to convince you to have a heart and understand and give the people the things, and you don't want to give the people the things because how do we know they deserve the things? And like, I would never do this without support. I would never stay in this job. Y'all know I quit a job before. I would never stay in this job without having the support, having resources, and having the trust of my teams to lead in a manner that is progressive and that can be seen and that does have impact on our output, on our actual output of work, on how we invest, on how we show up, on who gets to grow and who gets access to growth, and also every process in between that. And so that has been my experience because, one of the first things I said in my interview, I remember to the CEO at the time was, I actually believe this can happen. I do believe this is doable. I do know that it is slow, but I know that it is doable to get people the things that they need to be able to do their best work. Coming from operations, coming from being a project manager, a producer, that is what I know to be true. what it needs is buy-in and investment and resources from the people that have those things to be able to make it happen. But on the other side, I have other colleagues in the industry that don't have a budget, that don't have a team, that don't have a help. Like, why are we forcing our chief diversity officers to design decks because we won't give them access to a designer? Wild and crazy kids. Like, how you supposed to change hearts and minds about bias and microaggressions if you trying to figure out the CMYK of the color for the logo? Like, that makes no sense. It also
shout out to Canva. Shout out to everybody making decks in Canva right now.
Shout out to you know what I'm saying? Like, and that's not shade, but it's honest. Like, there you need the time, the space, the opportunity to do your job well, the access, the direct line to leadership and to the primary leadership too. Because in this work, you don't want nobody to like mince your words for you so that it don't hit right because you're not comfortable saying it. You want to be able to say, hey, Mr., Mrs., Miss, they, them, CEO, this is what's going on in our backyard. You want to change it or not? Like, you want to fix it or not? So, like, let me know, B, because if you don't, that's different. Cool. Now I know, now we know where we stand. Not me, but now we know where we stand. But if you're saying, yeah, go fix it as a head leader of a company or of a corporation, and your chief diversity officer cannot go say, I need to hire, I need to buy, I need to invest, I need to partner, because now they got to ask for incremental budget. That's wild and crazy. You're not real. And we've seen that. We've seen examples of what it looks like to be real, what it feels like to be real, but also the continuation of being gaslit to believe in people who won't. If you don't invest in it, I know you don't believe in it. You know, and so that's definitely something that we've seen. But shout out to everybody, because I know we still got bills to pay.
Word.
I know that folks got mortgages as oh my God, we both bought homes in that calendar year. We have homes. We have bigger bills.
I think I closed before we went on hiatus.
Yes, but like it's been a year, like over a year. So
oh yeah,
like responsibilities. Like shout out to everybody that has real responsibilities and needs the job, and that's the job you do. It's no shade to you. But also it's 100% shade. Actually, it's a spotlight on, you know, the gaslighting that continues to happen. So that's definitely something that was a trend. I would say one trend that I saw last year that was hilarious, interesting. Somebody needs to do a case study on it. I'm too old to, I'm at the point in my career in life where I like to go to bed at 8:00. So I personally won't be writing this case study, but anybody that wants a new hobby, try it. The rise and fall of an employee led job search. Like I remember, like, before the pandemic, if you were looking for a job, it was easier to get kind of like persuaded to just go with what we give you. And then the pandemic happened, the start of the pandemic happened, and everybody was like, life is too short for me to be out here making peanuts when I know that I can have steak at the next company. And so all of y'all quit. Everybody quit their job. Everybody quit their daggone job.
There was a shortage.
And was like, I don't need to live like this. And then they went to work for where they wanted to. And then the recession, that was absolutely like no surprise. Like I keep hearing people say we're not in a recession. I don't know what you're talking about, bruh, because I go to the grocery store. I bought a house with the interest rates. I keep seeing people literally lose their jobs. I actually saw a couple people who, especially primarily in the tech space, lost their jobs a couple times. Like they'd lose a job to Yeah, they were laid off from one company, got another job 3 months later, and then 6 months after that was laid off again, and like multiple
Damn.
reports of that. So like, what do you mean? What recession? Like, because I don't know, the rich white men in Washington D.C. haven't called it. This is the Kai session. This is, I don't like how this is. Um, I think what I've seen is like that, how it went from like, oh my God, I can do whatever I want, make all this money, ask for a ridiculous amount of money, to, oh my God, they're letting all of us go, to now it's been a lot harder for folks to find jobs. Like I'm seeing people that I know very well who are really having a hard time. It's a competitive market again. And in this being a competitive market, companies are starting to use work from home, or weaponizing, I guess is a better way to say, work from home. Well, if you want this job, you need to be in the office 5 days a week, 40
Mm,
hours or more a week, and that's that,
mm,
or you don't get the job. And it's like, now hold on a minute.
mm.
I thought that we established that the country, like from a monetary standpoint, was more productive. We've made
Yeah.
more money, especially, never forget, the mass layoffs that happened in the middle of the onset of the pandemic
Mm,
helped a lot of companies make their money. And then they hired everybody back up after that and had all this money to give them, right? But it's been interesting to see that flow of where the power swings from job prospect to company,
mm,
and how, and what is weaponized to help each entity get their way, you
mm,
know. That, I mean, I it's just wild, and I actually want to do a show on that, because it's like, I remember I wrote at the top of the pandemic about how y'all gave us 2 weeks off from work to work from home. You've opened up Pandora's box, and
mm.
somebody on the Instagram, no, on the Twitter,
TikTok.
no, on the Twitter, said that's not, because TikTok wasn't out yet. You see how
No,
quickly
TikTok was out.
nobody was
I made
using
my first.
TikTok
I
in
made
March
my
of
first.
2020.
I made my first TikTok in March of 2020. My
Yeah,
one
but
and
that was
only
after
TikTok.
Megan Thee Stallion, right? I'm talking about like before we knew that this was permanent.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Before we knew this was permanent. Before we were bored and looking for house party games to play. Okay.
What a time.
But
What a time.
there was a Twitter person who was like, that'll never happen. They will never let people work from home. And
Mm,
literally, like, that is the battle for autonomy, the battle for comfort, the battle for choosing your community has, for me, has been at the epicenter of I guess this job acquisition or talent acquisition
mm,
uh, movement, if you will. And so that has been something interesting for me to see, and my hope is also through the podcast that for those that are looking for jobs during this time, that we are able to help to give insight, feedback, tips, tricks, advice, etc. We also saw, Simeon, as I transition into another thought,
mm,
um we are also seeing the backlash of everything that we experienced over the last decade. I think you call it the backlash of the Obama years. Um,
mm.
I am looking at it like we are basically reliving Reconstruction all
Mm,
over again. It's been quite scary, actually, to see how the world, and so therefore marketing, has shifted from truly attempting to be open to new ideas and new ways of thinking, and social media and
mm,
technology giving people who were unheard and unplatformed before platforms to speak and share their truths, has now turned into a way for people who don't want people to know the truth, or who don't believe that in the truth themselves, to
mm,
promote their own ideals. And so we're seeing bills in Florida like don't say gay over the last year. Last year, never forget, Roe versus Wade was overturned by none other than the United States Supreme Court, who I think maybe only once before had overturned something, and that might have just been segregation. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like, just the wildest things in history have happened. We are seeing more mass murders, and not to minimize what happens in urban communities where, gun violence is, I'm not going to say more prevalent, but it's more highly publicized. But what we are seeing is more of it publicized in a way of how it affects more white communities, I guess is the only way to say it honestly, not necessarily nicely. But we're seeing more of that. We're seeing people look to violence as a way of expressing themselves. We're seeing more people ban education, like literally taking books out of school. Like, it's Fahrenheit. What is it? Fahrenheit 9/11? Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Y'all know what I'm talking about. It is,
We
we are
read it.
burning books. We are burning music. Shout out to Nicole Hannah-Jones, who we met back in 2019 at the Cannes Lion Creativity Festival and had great times having conversations with. But even her platform through the New York Times 1619 Project continues to be at the center of what I'm trying to find a good name to say, but I don't have it. But like, what conservative, ultra radically conservative, and I don't even think it's conservatism, but that's what they're calling it, ultra white conservative, evangelical Christian
nationalism.
Nationalist people are calling like woke washing. We're tired of this woke nonsense. And it's like, first of all, who doesn't want to be awake? Second of all, why are we going to extra lengths to hide things that are proven to be true? Because you don't want to hurt your kids. I think that's the narrative I see. We don't want our kids to feel bad in school. Meanwhile, my whole life I felt bad in school about like, I don't know how other kids are going to experience, like, how do you grow character if you're reading To Kill a Mockingbird and they talk about slaves and the N-word and the whole class doesn't turn around and look at you? Like, how do you know how to build confidence if you're not the only one in the class? How do you know how to, I say that in jest, but also in truth. And so that's a big backlash that I've seen that I think is also affecting our work. It's affecting how brands approach inclusion. It's affecting,
absolutely.
It's affecting what we put on social media. It's affecting what we validate as truth and non-truth, and that's been weird. Even the Fire Festival, freaking fucking Fire Festival is coming back with like a new friggin' name, and nothing will ever piss me off like this headline pissed me off this year, because this man not just schemed and scammed, but he schemed and scammed rich people, and y'all still let him come back. He gave y'all bologna sandwiches, went to jail for a while, and came out, and folks was like, I mean, everybody deserves a second chance.
And just shout out to everybody who scammed all the rich people during the pandemic. The Thanos chick. We could probably say one of these crypto platforms was also out here scamming. It's been really interesting to watch something that we've said on this podcast before, which is white people, the dominant culture, if you will, often get hired or the perks of the promise that they can do. And people of color or women often, people of color often have to show proof in order to get through the door. And so to watch how, especially the Thanos story, like to watch how she scammed them is like, wow, like chef's kiss. Like just
like, I want to be clear, we're not talking about Thanos from the Marvel movie.
Marvel. the Thanos blood analyzer machine. Yeah.
It's like so much has happened. But like, yes, It's a lot. It's a whole lot of scamming. It's a whole lot of covering up. It's a whole lot of trying to undo what we've learned, what people have gone to great lengths to learn. And it's affecting our work. I think one of the things that I saw last year that was, it wasn't wild and crazy to me, but it was something that I'm like, I'm gonna keep an eye on because it's not the only one, is that we actually started to see people within agencies talking about, what was the campaign? DIE, DEI, die DEI. If you don't want to
Yes.
work, basically taking a call from Suge Knight. It was on some shit like, if you don't want DEI to influence your creativity, it was basically come to death row kind of shit. And I was like, this is where we are. This is where we are, where it's there are big polar opposites in thinking about how the world should work. And instead of figuring out how to best engage each other in productive ways, because sometimes the productive ways just like, don't talk to me, like I don't care, like don't talk to me. People actually want to snuff other people out. So we are in some weird times. I think I keep saying that to everybody. It's weird as fuck. And
Right.
we have different perspectives because we've matured, we've grown in our careers, and we've seen more things. Like we joke about all the time, like we actually know where a lot of bodies are buried.
We do. And how they're buried.
And how they're buried. I don't think people realize, like over the years, like the secrets people would tell us, like obviously we're not going to say them on this show, but like we know so much about this industry, the people within it, that it's like there does need to be, this voice needs to be out there. There are other voices speaking truth to power now. But I think it's going to be our duty, and I'm looking forward to it, to keep everybody abreast on not just what's happening and whether or not we agree with it, but the complexities behind how they are happening, so we can all just be more aware. So,
Right. Take it.
all right. So,
Do you have a dope shit, or
do I have a dope shit? Yeah, I'm sure I have a dope shit. So much has happened. I think you know what? I do have a dope shit. Shout out to Rihanna, and the Super Bowl, um, for just stomping on, like, when I say applying pressure to next, Rihanna said, listen, y'all. She said a couple things, but she said, listen, y'all keep asking me about music. I'm out here making billions of dollars. I don't understand why you want to hear music. I'm just going to give you remixes of music I've done in the past. And then I know you keep asking me for an album, but I'm going to come on the biggest United States stage, North American stage, to let y'all know I am going back in the house to raise my babies. Yes, babies. Because not just one do I have, but I have a second. And while I do it, I'm going to drop a Vogue cover. And while I do it, I want my sales from my beauty and lingerie lines to increase. And I'm going to raise children, and I'm going to be in a relationship that I define the way I want to. And I'm not gonna lie, when she was on that stage and I saw ASAP Rocky, and she got the baby, and you trying to be like, is that baby weight or a new baby? Like, we were all kind of talking about it. We wanted to know. I was like, sis is setting a new standard for what it means to be a working mom. This is not the working mom of the 90s and the 2000s, and no shade to them. My mom was a working mom in the 90s, not showing up to school events, telling me, you let them know your mother works. But shout out to Sonia. But it's a new outlook on what it looks like to have as much as you want when you want. Because I know as a woman, especially coming into that phase in my life, there's conversations about how do you balance.
Right.
Rihanna showed me how the fuck you want, and if that means that we squeezing into this red jumpsuit with a baby bump, or otherwise, that's what we're doing to go back on sabbatical. Also, shout out to Beyonce for giving the longest marketing rollout of an album ever. Like, this is about to be a 5-year rollout with this international concert tour. Just shout out to all the ladies doing it. That's it for me. That's dope shit.
What a time to be alive. it's really interesting to watch the both of their careers because they are master marketers, and everything that they do resonates within culture. Like it's the thing that people want to talk about, and it's going to be the thing that people reference for a long time. I have a quick dope shit, which is a few weeks ago, like beginning of February, Netflix and General Motors announced that they are in a partnership
Yep.
for basically the two are joining together on their Everybody In campaign that aims to accelerate mass adoption of electric vehicles. And basically, what's going to happen in this partnership is they're going to increase the presence of electric vehicles in Netflix produced TV shows and movies wherever they feel like it's relevant. And Kai and I were talking about this the other day. I think that this is genius. It is the future of brands creating content, I don't want to say real content, but creating content that is going to be consumed differently, that people want to consume. Because if we're keeping it a buck, I don't know about your Hulu, but my shit is on ad free because
No,
I
I'm not
don't
that rich yet. No, I'm not.
I don't want it. So I think that this is the future, and I think we're going to see more agencies and brands figuring out how to organically place products in TV shows. And the example that I've been giving is season 1 of Insecure when they were fighting in the Rite Aid. And, you know, Issa was like, we're not about to be the black couple fighting in the Rite Aid. That has stuck with me for the last 5 years or so, because that was like genius brand placement. And it was also putting a brand really in the center of culture in a way that we'll always remember. So I think this is extremely dope. If this is what you're working on, holla at me. I'm down for the count. But yeah, this is definitely like dope shit, and I'm really excited to see where it goes.
There's definitely a lot of entertainment and advertising converging with technology, and I'm sure that I'll be speaking about that as well. So yes, that is dope shit. The ain't shit, the world is on fire still, is hot. I don't really have nothing else to say. Turn on the news. In fact, just open whatever social media platform you use. The world is on fire. That's the ain't
They
shit.
beefing.
They
That's the
beefing.
headline. They
They
beefing.
beefing. Everybody is beefing.
They beefing.
All right. Well, we have so much more to come to you guys after this episode. You'll hear from us at different conferences and different spaces. I think we have an episode coming from Sundance. Yes, we went to Sundance Film Festival and that was wild. Wild in a good way too, not necessarily that way. So we can't wait to talk to you guys more about that and share all things culture and say all the things you wouldn't say in mixed company.
Mixed company.
Peace out.
Peace out, y'all.